Hi, today I am going to do a book review, and today I'm going to do a book review on this series. It is the Laura Ingalls Wilder series, which starts The Little House in the Big Woods. If you haven't come across these books, you might know about Little House on the Prairie, which was a series from many years ago. And it's a true story about a family. Laura was one of them. So it's a true story about her experience from being a very young girl all the way up to when she marries. And her two sisters, her mother and her father, Ma and Pa, they travel through the States. They settle in different places, and they travel around in a wagon with a big canvas covering, and they go and try and settle in areas, and if that doesn't work out they move on to others, and it's just about their adventures, their experiences, and how they go about starting their new lives in the new places in which they go. And they experience immense challenges, difficult times, but it is just the most amazing story. When I was a child, this was my favourite series. So I started reading this probably when I was about 7 or 8. I've read it with my eldest son. I'm currently reading it through with my 8-year-old daughter. I reread this series again probably about 2 years ago, and it's always a bit worrying when you revisit a book that you have loved in the past, because a lot of the time it doesn't lead up to the expectations of which you've got in your mind. But actually, as an adult, it absolutely blew my head. So as a child, I loved it, and as a teenager and in my 20s, I travelled a lot, and I'm sure it's from reading these books about how interesting different places can be, and to not get stuck in that one place. But then reading it as an adult and as a mother, realising the hard life that these parents were living. They were having to build their own houses, they were having to work the land, they were having to build with nothing. And at the start of the book, they're living in some woods, and there aren't many people around. But then as time goes by, more and more settlers come in, and they really have very, very little. They live off the land, they hunt for their meat, they grow a few plants, they harvest, they pickle, they dry, they salt, they smoke their meat for the winter. So their entire life is about working in the seasons. The father would sell the furs of the animals that he catches in the winter to earn enough money so they can buy flour and buy sugar and buy tobacco. But nearly everything, and some material for their clothes, but nearly everything else they either foraged for, grew or hunted. And then gradually, as time goes by, you also see the history of America, the introduction of the railroad, introduction of the telegraph, of electricity, and the ability to be able to communicate through sort of electric telegrams, and how this impacts them. So it's not just their personal story, it's also looking at the history of America, the impact it had on the indigenous people there, the way that the indigenous people were perceived, the challenges that settlers would have, the hardships in which they existed in, and the difficulties of living in very extreme weathers. So there is one book called The Long Winter, in which they were living in this little house in this immensely cold time where blizzards were raging. They were living, I think, in -20, -25 degrees. But that consideration of they had got no electricity, they had one room where they had a little stove where they kept the fire going, and very minimal food, and they were breaking the ice off the insides of the windows. And it just really, really makes you think. It gets life in perspective, and the characters are fascinating. Laura is a brilliant character. She's so full of energy, so full of personality. And the expectations of how women were meant to be back then, and how children were meant to be back then. You know, they were meant to be seen but not heard. And it's fascinating to read the difference within society. So even though these books, I suppose, are written for young, well, sort of 10-year-olds maybe. I mean, my 8-year-old's really enjoying them. As an adult, they are absolutely brilliant. So I really recommend for you to read these, share these with your children, read them with your children. Or if you want, just go in, read into it, because the coziness and love and the connection within the family values they had were just absolutely wonderful. So I really, really recommend reading the Laura Ingalls series. You can get those in the library. And I'd really like to know what you think of them too. Enjoy reading.